Hello, theater addicts. I am Melody Owen. I am here with David Lee Morgan, playwright and slam poet champion in the United Kingdom and for the BBC. And you are here at Fringe this year doing The Other Side of the Flood, which is a spoken word musical theater piece. Excellent. But I hear you have a lot of Fringe experience. Would you tell us about that?
I did my first Fringe in 1997 at the Edinburgh Fringe, and I did several there, but what's happened at the Edinburgh Fringe is that rental for the venues has gotten more and more expensive, and it reached a point where to rent a venue you had to mortgage your house and give your firstborn child, and I don't have any children, so I had to quit performing for a while. And then a new thing has come along. It's been there a while, but it's especially big in the last 7-8 years, called the Free Fringe, which is a part of the Edinburgh Fringe, but rather than paying rent to a venue, you get the venue for free, and in return you don't charge admission. You take up a collection when they leave. And it works really well, especially it works well for poetry and spoken word, which is kind of what I do.
What is your favorite thing as an artist performing at a Fringe?
Well, it's different at different fringes. At the Edinburgh Fringe, for sure, the coolest thing about it is that it lasts a month, and you can do an hour-long show for a month. Normally you can't do something like that unless you're famous, right? But anybody can come and do that, and it's a chance to grow. It's a chance to perfect a show, or it's a chance to, even if your show is perfect when you get there, it's a chance to do it over and over and to have your mind blossom with what you're going to do the next time. This is my first time to do Vancouver, but based on the few I've done, Montreal and San Francisco, it's much more of like a family affair. And it's not so incredibly expensive as to do the Edinburgh Fringe is pretty hard to do, even with the Free Fringe.
What are you looking forward to about the Vancouver Fringe?
Well, one thing is just the family experience that I already mentioned. Also, at the CAF Fringes, I'm in a theater that's well equipped, and I can do stuff with the lighting that when I do the Fringe show in Edinburgh, it's a really cool venue. It's called the Banshee Labyrinth. It's the best venue in the Edinburgh Fringe for spoken word. It's very cutting edge. They're very helpful. It's an alt-rock pub in its normal day job kind of life. Very cool, very cutting edge, but it's not set up for theater. So to be in a theater that has all the stuff and has a technician that wants to make your show a success, and also I just very slight brag, because I don't have great box offices, but so far every time I've done a Fringe in the Canadian Fringe, my biggest fan has been the tech person. Both times they've loved my show, and in fact at the Montreal Fringe she brought in her parents and grandparents to see me, which was a lucky thing because I needed the audience.
Awesome. Love our tech people. So tell me about your show. Tell me about the story of your show, how it came to be.
Well, I have a book that's just been published, The River Was a God, which is a line from one of the poems in the book, the final lines of the poem. The river was a god until we built a dam. And it's the first part of the show was written through performances in the spoken word scene in London. And I would argue that London, in the UK, London, is the best, most exciting city in the world for English-speaking poetry, because young, revolutionary-minded people come in from all over the world, especially from the English-speaking parts of the world, which is quite extensive. And you go to a night in London and you'll find people from Central Africa, from all over Africa, from South America, and they all have different perspectives and different artistic traditions. And so this first show was written doing poetry for the London scene during and right after the Arab Spring. So it was like a hot debate about the world, and full of optimism at the start and despair and anger as each of the revolutions were turned into their opposites. So that was the first book. It was called Science, Love, and Revolution. The second book was it was called Building God, which was a horrible mistake. People thought it was about Jesus. And it was actually a look at three iconic revolutions: the Paris Commune, the Russian Revolution, and the Cultural Revolution in China. And I kind of wrote it with the attitude of, well, this is what I think. If you don't like it, buzz off. And to my surprise, people did like it. They didn't walk out with the same view of those revolutions that I had, but I wasn't trying for that. I was just trying to say, look, if you want to change the world, these were people like you who were very idealistic and were giving their lives to change the world. And you should take your own look at these histories and not just, as another poet said, look at history through your enemy's eyes. So people came out and said, yeah, well, you've convinced us. We should look again at these and come to our own conclusions. And they took my point that you can't understand how they failed unless you understand what they achieved and what their ideals were. But, they said, almost universally, they said, but it could never happen again because things have changed too much. So that was my challenge for the third part of this book and the show that I'm doing here, The Other Side of the Flood. A computer wakes up in the year 2035 on the eve of a worldwide socialist revolution. And I'm not a genius, and I'm not a fortune teller, so I wasn't planning to present a blueprint of how it's going to happen and when it's going to happen, but just say, imagine that it could happen, and what would that feel like? Let's imagine for a change that instead of fighting against all these attacks, that we win. What would that be like? I wasn't especially interested in writing science fiction and writing about technology, but 2035, what is surveillance going to be like by then? You know, I mean, what is it like now? We hardly even know, but by then, the amount of surveillance is going to be devastating. And so you can't imagine having a revolution without dealing with that. Fortunately, my ex-wife is in computer films. And her new husband, and I get on with him really. In fact, I get on better with my ex-partner's new partners than I ever did with my partners. So I get on really well with both of them, and he's a computer genius. And so I picked their brains, and they also took me to their monthly gathering of computer nerds who get drunk and talk about things that I don't understand. And I got the idea that helped me to really take off on this is that by the year 2035, roughly, it will be possible to download the entire contents of a human brain into a computer. And that's actually non-controversial. Pretty much everyone agrees that's the case. What it will mean, nobody knows. Everybody has their theories. Well, will that person come alive inside the computer, and what would that be like? So I took that and ran with it in the show. And then there was a third thing that was really important to me, was if you imagine there's going to be a worldwide revolutionary change, unless you're Richard Dawkins or someone like that, it's not going to happen with everybody becomes an atheist and then they change the world. It's going to be an alliance of people who have very conflicting, different beliefs. And I am an atheist now. I was raised a Catholic and studied to be a priest. In fact, we make the best atheists. But I have experience from the anti-war movement of some of the most radical, determined allies that we had were priests and nuns who came back from Africa and South America just blazing with anger at what they'd seen done to their flocks, both by U.S. imperialism and also by Russian social imperialism. And they were pacifists, but they were fearless. And a lot of them spent decades in jail because of that. So I wanted to write about that, and an alliance between people who are religious and people who aren't. And I know that, funny enough, probably the two most famous atheists culturally, Marx and Nietzsche, both had a really healthy appreciation for the role of religion in developing our ideals. Not many people know that the second half of Marx's famous sentence about religion reads like this: religion is the opiate of the masses, comma, the heart of a heartless world.
As an audience member, I'm coming into this, and so you're not telling me what the world is going to be like. You're not dictating anything to me. Are you going to leave me thinking about ideas, playing with ideas, questioning what I thought was to be true? What might my experience be?
Yeah, that's great. I like that. I hope that's the case. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
And it's not about the world that happens after. It's not really about the other side of the flood, as you might say. It's about the flood. It's about that instant when the revolution happens. This is also influenced a lot by friends I had who were in Vietnam in combat. And I enlisted in the Navy when I was a junior in high school, but fortunately for me, I got high blood pressure and was discharged before being sent over there. But a lot of my friends were there. I had these people, friends who had these intense experiences in Vietnam. And in particular, I was influenced in writing this story by my memory and also, to be honest, partly my mismemory of what happened to him. And the way I remember it is that, and it's pretty close to what actually did happen, was that when he was a teenager, his little sister came back from school crying because the teacher had molested her. And he was the kind of guy, the kind of brother who, when he heard that, got a baseball bat and went down to the school and put the teacher in the hospital. And he was from a small town. Everybody knew everybody, including the judge. And when it came to court, the judge said, look, we know what you did, we know why you did it, and we can't say the guy didn't deserve it. But he was a teacher, and he's still in the hospital, and I can't let you walk around on the streets. So we've cut a deal with the Army. You're a year too young, but they're going to look the other way about your age, and you can go into the Army instead of prison. And so, as a young teenager, he went into the Army, into a combat unit. And as with most people that were in that situation, you know, it's affected him all his life. He came back blazing with anger at being used the way he had, and became active in the anti-war movement and became a revolutionary. And I knew him during that period. And after the war was over, some people from Vietnam, some soldiers who had been in the opposing army in the North Vietnamese army, came over to the United States, and my friend met with them and said, I don't know how you could ever forgive me for what I've done. You know, I killed your people. I killed maybe even people you knew, maybe family, friends. And they said, listen, you're a revolutionary now. You're on our side. You're our brother. And they put their arms around them. And I have trouble telling. Every time I tell it, I tear up, and you can imagine what it was like for him. And so I wanted to write about that story. And I wanted it to be a part of the show. And so part of the show is a love story between Jesse in the show, who was, as a young lad, went to South Asia where another Vietnam War was happening, Vietnam type war was happening, and Sultana, who was a revolutionary from Dhaka, from Bangladesh, and whose brother Kaiser had been a freedom fighter as well, and who had been killed in the war. And Sultana and Jesse meet and fall in love, and I wanted that to be part of the story. So yeah, those are all the elements that went into it. It took me almost as long to tell that as the show, probably.
No, that was really powerful. Yeah, thank you. There are a lot of layers in this show. So I'm curious about the rehearsal process. It is a one-man show. So can you tell me a little bit about the rehearsal process with all these layers and all these characters and all this depth?
Yeah, well, in fact, that's exactly what the development of the show wrestled with, because there's 7 different voices, 6 people and 1 abstract computer voice. And I'm American, so I can't do accents. And so it's partly by positioning on the stage, and partly because it's a musical, I tried to use Wagner's idea of a leitmotif for different characters, except sadly I'm not quite as good a composer as Wagner was. But so I tried to use music a little bit to differentiate between the characters. I did the show at the Edinburgh Fringe last year and rewrote it every single day. After the show, people would come out and I would cross-examine them. You know, what did you get? What happened here? What happened here? And I found that pretty much everybody liked the show a lot. They loved the songs, the lyrics, the music, and the parts that they got. But only about half of the people got the entire storyline from beginning to end. So I would keep rewriting it. I kept adding a longer introduction to set the scene. The book has been reprinted. It was printed in the UK, and now it's printed in the US. And the UK version has the prose monologue. This version has the song text in it. So when you come to the show, I know you'll want to buy the book. You get the latest version.
Awesome. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we go?
Probably, yeah, if you got an hour. Come to the show. I think it's intense, but people seem to enjoy it a lot. And pretty much everybody gets the storyline now. And talk to me afterwards. I'd love to know what you think of it.
Thank you, David. I'm here with David Lee Morgan. He's doing The Other Side of the Flood at Falls Creek Gym, and I am Melody Owen for Theatre Addicts, and this is Vancouver Fringe 2018. We'll see you there.